Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our Tips for Healthy Holiday Eating webinar. Just a quick note that the full webinar recording will be made available to all registrants after the webinar is over. So be looking for it in your email inbox. To kick things off with quick introductions, I'm Lisa Lavery with Foodsmart, and I'll be your webinar host today. I head up culinary development and manage content for a company in San Francisco with my husband, two preteen kids who are in-person learning right now, and my stinky English bulldog Moose. For those of you who aren't familiar with Foodsmart, we're a digital nutrition platform whose goal is to make eating well simple. And joining me is one of my favorite coworkers and co-hosts, Maddie Reeder.
Aw, thanks, Lisa. And hi, everybody. My name is Maddie, and I'm a registered dietitian by training, and I'm a clinical account consultant for Foodsmart. I live in North Carolina with my fiance and our goofy pup Ghost, who is ready for the holidays and all of the treats that come along with it.
So we're going to start off with our presentation and then get into answering the questions that you all submitted. We have a few that were submitted before the webinar. And if you haven't had a chance to, feel free to share them via the Q&A icon or in the chat at the bottom or top of your screen. We'll answer as many as we can during that section at the end. And if you have any general questions, need support, looking for a link, please put them in the chat. Claire, who I mentioned, who is a Texas person. She's another one of my favorite coworkers. She'll be happy to help you out.
All right. During our time together today, we will share our best strategies for celebrating the season while maintaining a healthful lifestyle. This includes our top tips for savoring a balanced holiday feast, festive food swaps that will help you cut down on empty nutrients, and some simple tricks to navigate those tempting holiday goodies.
Thanks so much for the overview, Maddie. And with that, let's get started by chatting about balance during the holidays. That's a big one. It's really a struggle for myself and for so many others year after year. Why is that?
I completely agree. And after all this time, you'd think it would be less challenging, but it's a struggle every year. Honestly, this has a lot to do with the misinformation that we hear. I feel like each year there's a new methodology or a diet to try. And in reality, the best way to find balance is to go back to the basics of nutrition.
I think that's a great point, Maddie. Getting back to basics in anything is key. So can you explain why balance is so important? Like I said, it's always such a big buzzword that we sometimes forget why it matters. It's out there in the world, but we're not really sure what it means.
Yeah, absolutely, I can. But let's actually pull our group quick to see what they think balance is all about during the holidays.
All right. Okay, so here we go. Why is balance so important during the holidays? 1, so you don't turn into a Grinch. 2, so that you can still fit into your favorite jeans in January. Or 3, so that you can survive the stress of the season without disowning your family. So we'll give everyone a couple minutes to answer.
I don't know about you, Lisa, but all of these options are pretty tempting to me.
I can identify with them, I'll be honest. Looks like it's a pretty tight race between keeping your jeans and letting go of your family. Jeans versus jeans.
That's right. Oh, that was clever, Lisa. I love that.
Thank you. I'm here.
All of the above I'm seeing in the chat. I love that. Yes.
All right, so we're trickling in here still a little bit. Thanks everybody for participating. We love doing these polls. So Maddie, why don't you share with everyone the correct answer?
Well, our correct answer is actually the third one. We want to be able to survive the stress of the season. And I know this is a silly poll here just to make all of us think. Truly, it's a trick question when we think about it, though. The importance of balanced nutrition varies from person to person. And for some of us, that is maintaining our health and wellness goals. And for the rest, it might be to maintain our mental health as we get through this crazy, chaotic time of year. So the best reason overall to monitor your balance in your diet is to find physiological and psychological peace to feel your best and to stay healthy, whatever that means for you.
Yep, that's great, Maddie. It can feel really overwhelming for me sometimes, and I'm sure everyone on our call can relate. During the holidays, with everything so stressful, you're trying to divide your time between so many different efforts. What's something easy that we can focus on to just balance our nutrition to start?
Yeah, great point, Lisa. We always think of quantity when it comes to nutrition during the holidays, but I think many of us know the importance of not overdoing it on things like mashed potatoes or desserts. So I want to change it up this year and talk about ingredient quality for a healthier season. Many key ingredients we cook with during the holiday season are high in sodium. So think about things like cooking stock or broth, pre-made gravies you might be purchasing, canned vegetables, canned soups, especially your cream of options like cream of mushroom, for example. Meats and cheeses are your typical culprits of high sodium. And just a small amount of those items can put you over your daily recommended allowance of salt, which can have a lot of side effects. This can make you feel bloated and generally uncomfortable. It can also elevate your blood pressure. And we know that there is some correlation between hypertension and mood, which is especially important when we have a house full of family members. And we all know that bloating and being in a bad mood definitely don't mix. And finally, added sodium can also cause excessive thirst. This is something that we forget about a lot. Thirst is often mistaken for hunger in the body. Your body can't differentiate between the two cues, hunger and thirst. So it can actually have you reaching for more food when in all actuality, you're already full. Your body just hasn't gotten that cue yet.
That's such a great point, Maddie. Filling up a big plate with all the holiday fixins is usually the goal, and it's definitely my goal for the most part. We focus so much on what and how many items we have on our plate. We want to get a little taste of everything versus what ingredients are actually in those items when they were being prepared.
Exactly. So what I recommend is choosing low sodium options where you can to help you cut back. When cooking, don't add salt to the foods where it's unnecessary. You can always add salt at the end of the cooking process when you're taste testing, or you can add it at the table when needed. And then it gives people the option to add or skip it for themselves. And finally, I recommend trying to find some festive recipes like the ones on the Foodsmart digital platform that don't call for soups or canned items as an ingredient, and that will help cut back in a really big way.
What I love about all these tips is that they're actually practical, which means you can really improve your nutrition with just some simple swaps. I'm going to share a few more tips and tricks later, but these are great starting points, Maddie.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. And we're looking forward to some of those tips and tricks that we'll see in a little bit here. The holidays are complicated enough, and we don't need to make nutrition difficult too. Another thing we don't talk about enough during the holidays are beverages. Sometimes it's not just the food we eat over the holidays that does us in, but the beverages we consume are the real troublemakers here.
Yep. During my day-to-day life, if you look at my desk right now, my beverages consist of bubbly water, coffee, and sometimes an adult beverage on occasion, especially during the holidays. Um, and then it's like I turn into a different person once the calendar flips to November, December. Hot chocolate, spiked cider punch, soda, spiked eggnog, you name it. If it's festive and fun, I'm all over it.
I feel the same way, and beverages really give you a feeling of fullness that can last much longer than we realize. Because beverages like hot chocolate or cranberry punch aren't well-rounded sources of nutrition, you'll likely find yourself suddenly starving once your body has processed the simple sugars from those beverages, and then that can have you overfilling your plate as a result. Overindulging during the holidays is normal and it's okay, but doing so when you're misreading hunger cues can cause GI upset like bloating, as I mentioned before, and even some other symptoms like headaches. So what I recommend is to pay close attention to the drinks you choose, but also how much of each you're having and when. When I talk about nutrition, I always like to talk about three things, and that's amount, type, and timing. This is really important when it comes to beverages. And the holidays are so special And I know I'm not going to be without my festive cinnamon hot chocolate or my festive adult beverages, but I will be watching my serving size and I'll be making sure that I'm spacing it out between my meals versus having all of my beverages at once alongside my feast. And that'll help me give some more balance to my day during a stressful time.
That is such a great point. I love the idea of being able to enjoy what I like, but in amounts that make sense and that don't collide with my food choices.
Yeah, and that leads us into our next important topic, which is monitoring your meals throughout the day. I hear from folks all the time that they skip breakfast on the holidays so that they can overindulge for lunch and dinner, or that they skip the carbs at their meals so that they can eat as much pie as possible later on.
Totally. And as you could probably guess, my main issue is that because I'm the chef in the family, I spend a lot of time in the kitchen tasting and sampling to make sure it all comes out delicious. And then when it's actually time to eat, I'm not hungry. So I don't really eat that much until it's all over and I've cleaned up. And then I'm on the couch watching Home Alone, ready to eat a full meal. But by that time, it's too late. I eat it anyway. How can folks on the call get into a more mindful space when it comes to holiday eating?
Exactly. And you're definitely not alone there, Lisa. The problem with this eating cycle, either skipping meals or waiting too long to actually eat a full meal that your body needs, is that you aren't giving your body the balance of your macronutrients, your carbs, your proteins, and your fats that it needs to function properly, feel satisfied, and get you through your day. And that actually causes more cravings and can lead you to overeat. And again, the problem with overeating isn't necessarily that it's going to do you in or ruin your diet, but overeating can lead us to feel really uncomfortable. We talked about that GI discomfort. It can impact your mood. And there's a whole host of other issues that can leave you feeling down and out for a few days when you overdo it too much.
So, not skipping meals is one of your first suggestions, and that sounds really great. What else can we do to help find some balance during the holiday season?
Exactly. Avoid skipping meals to quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, but to save your calories and eat at least a little something for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that day. As I mentioned, try to avoid beverages that are calorically dense without nutrient density, so that are high in calorie or high in sugar, but don't actually have quality carbs, proteins, or fats in them. I also recommend that you have a fruit or a vegetable on your plate for each of the meals that you're eating throughout the day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I know as an RD, that sounds like a very nutrition science related response, but your fruits and vegetables, we forget a lot of times they're filled with fiber, which can help your gut, especially when you're eating a lot of savory, rich foods. And they also contain some water to help you stay hydrated when you are chasing your family around all day.
I really love these suggestions, Maddie. Most of us think of food during the holidays from the lens of counting calories and guilt around certain types of food. How can we shift that mindset?
Right. Really, if we can let those things go and think more about how will this make me feel? Will it make me feel icky, good, tired? Will it energize me? Then it's so much easier to enjoy these special moments in time. Give yourself that grace and get back on a regular routine when the season ends. I'm seeing in the chat as we're chatting here, Lisa, that so many people are talking about all of their favorite things and the beverages that they love. And I think it's so important to love and enjoy all of those things and just give yourself the grace to do that. So that way you can just get right back to your life after the holidays are over and really enjoy those moments when they're happening. So all that being said, though, holiday food tends to be so comforting and really high in fat and sodium, as we talked about a few slides ago. What tips do you have for making sure your friends and family feel like they're eating a special meal without all of the excess sticks of butter?
Yep, during the holidays, my dairy drawer is packed. And I do feel that there's a time and place for indulgence, and the holiday season is it. But with that being said, when I'm planning out my meals and my menus, I look at recipes and see where there are easy opportunities to swap in healthier ingredient options where I can. Here's a few of my favorite savory suggestions. So I like to swap sour cream with Greek yogurt. It's an easy way to get the same tangy, rich flavor in recipes. It has less fat, is lower in calories and higher in protein. And since I love multitasking in the kitchen, I like that I can use the yogurt to serve in the morning with a little leftover cranberry sauce swirled in and sprinkled with some toasted nuts. And speaking of nuts, I like to swap that sugary, buttery crumble that you often see on top of those sweet potatoes and those streusel toppings with some toasted nuts like almonds, pecans, and walnuts. They're a heart-healthy substitute that delivers on that satisfying crunch and flavor everyone's looking for. I sprinkle them on top of mashed potatoes and over sauteed vegetables like those green beans that everybody's looking for. And then you really don't even need that cream of mushroom soup. Another easy way to control salt and fat is to make your own salad dressing. I think a bright, fresh salad is really important to have on the table just to help cleanse your palate and get you ready for those rich sides and main events. And just 3 or 4 simple pantry ingredients can be whisked together to make a balanced dressing. Oil, a little bit of olive oil, some acid, and that can be white wine, red wine vinegar, even a little bit of lemon or lime juice, salt, and something sweet, just a little something sweet. During the holiday season, I love to reach for a little bit of maple syrup and maybe some cider vinegar to make a really fall-inspired dressing. And since everyone is looking for mashed potatoes to be on the table, I like to swap in a few cups of steamed cauliflower for russets in my mashed potatoes. They're lower in carbohydrates and calories, and people don't even really notice, and it really, really lightens it up. When I'm looking at savory recipes, not baking, because we're going to be talking about that in just a minute, I usually cut down on the butter and salt by at least 1/4 in recipes. And then at the end, I taste and add any additional seasoning. And then if you're looking for that satisfying crisp crunch, I recommend trying roasting or baking instead of frying as a cooking method. I also love to put the baking sheet in the oven while it's heating up to get extra browning. And that way, when you toss your Brussels sprouts or your butternut squash or your sweet potatoes in olive oil and seasonings, it will sizzle on the pan, and then you know that you're getting some browning, and that browning equals delicious flavor.
Those are some amazing tips, Lisa. I especially like cutting your butter and salt back and then tasting at the end and seeing what else you need versus just adding it all up front. So now that we've talked about our savory items, let's pivot to our dessert table. Do you have any unique recipe swap ideas for the sweet tooth in all of us?
I definitely do. And like I said before, since baking recipes are more rooted in science, it's not quite as easy to freewheel in the kitchen as when you're making some mashed potatoes, but I can share some easy swaps that give great results. And just a little reminder for you guys, the next few slides, I'll have ratios for you. So feel free to take a screenshot, and we'll also be sending the slide deck to you guys so you can reference those when you're making your favorite holiday desserts. And so just like my savory, when I'm looking to make my favorite sweet holiday treats, I scan the ingredients and find areas where I can make swaps that are smarter choices. In most dessert recipes, there are 3 general areas where you can look to swap ingredients that will keep the integrity of the dish, and you can add healthier options: your flours, your sweeteners, and your fats. So first, let's talk about the all-important flour.
Yes, please. I feel like this topic is the most overwhelming to me each year because I want to make sure I get it right. So I will take all the advice you've got, Lisa.
Yep, let's do it. So there's so many different types of flours out there, and people get nervous when you're mixing and matching flours because they think that their recipe won't turn out right. But here is a really easy cheat sheet for you to follow. So first is whole wheat flour. Whole wheat flour is white flour's denser cousin. It's ground from the entire wheat grain. So this type of flour will produce a little denser baked good, and it also gives a nutty, deep flavor. And you can feel comfortable replacing half of the all-purpose flour for whole wheat in any recipe without changing the integrity of the dish. So if your recipe calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of all-purpose, and 1 cup of whole wheat flour. And beyond wheat flour, there's a whole range of wheat and gluten-free flours you can play around with to add texture and flavor. The next flour I want to talk about is spelt. Spelt is a kind of whole grain flour that does a great job of mimicking regular wheat flour thanks to the gluten content and low density. And since it has a decent amount of protein and fiber, it gives a fluffier texture to baked goods. Again, you can substitute at least 50% of the all-purpose flour with spelt in any recipe. And once you start to experiment a little bit with spelt flour, you can even up the ratio according to your preference. I really love to put spelt flour in my pie doughs, especially if I'm going to do like a savory pie, like a pot pie. Spelt flour adds a really, really interesting depth of flavor. So next we have almond flour. Almond flour is made with almonds that have been blanched and then finely ground to a light floury texture. Its sister, almond meal, is simply a little bit more coarsely ground. You can make it at home or purchase it in the baking aisle of most grocery stores. I recommend storing it in the freezer just so that it keeps a little bit longer. Almond flour is rich in protein, unsaturated fat, vitamin E, anything you think about those nice heart healthy fats and nuts. And you can substitute about 30% of this type of flour in any recipe you have. And then we have oat flour. Oat flour is the easiest flour substitute. If you've got oats in your pantry, then you've got oat flour. All you have to do is add them to a food processor or blender and buzz them until they're fully ground. Oat flour has a great texture. You can even hold back some of the rolled oats in your batter to give a little bit of extra texture in there. Oats have protein and fiber to add health benefits, and its mild sweet taste makes it really versatile. I like to reach for oat flour in pancake, cookie, and muffin recipes, also those really great quick breads that we have on the table. And you can feel free to substitute about 30% of this flour in any recipe that you have.
I am so glad that you walked us through that. And this is a really helpful cheat sheet. Thank you, Lisa. What other tips do you have for us for the holidays?
So let's move on to, we'll get there in a second here. Our sugar alternatives. So granulated sugar, brown sugar, sometimes both, are found in almost every baked good recipe. Their coarse grind adds texture and lift to baked goods, but we all know that these refined sweeteners aren't the best for us. So in the interest of moderation, let's look at some alternatives to these refined sweeteners. So first we have honey. Honey is a flavor powerhouse. Not only is it rich, intense, and syrupy sweet, there's so many different types of honey to choose from. Mild clover, deep, dark buckwheat, you have options. And from a nutrition standpoint, honey contains more fructose than glucose, requiring our bodies to burn more calories to convert it into glucose for usable energy. Just a note that honey tastes sweeter than regular sugar, so you can probably use less of it in recipes, and the flavor of the honey will shine through. So I really like to use honey in soft, moist cakes, quick breads, puddings, ice creams, and gelato. So next we have maple syrup. I always have maple syrup in my pantry. I mentioned before that I like to use it to make vinaigrettes. I put it in my coffee as a sweetener. We've always got it around, so I can reach for this pretty easily. It has a nice thick consistency and an earthy sweetness. So pure maple syrup undergoes less processing than refined sugars. It also has antioxidants and minerals like zinc and potassium, and it has a lower glycemic index than refined sugars, meaning it won't lead to those spikes of blood sugar that can give you the jitters throughout the day. I will note that it is a bit pricier than regular sugar, so I reach for maple syrup to make fancy caramels, candies, ice creams, and puddings during the holidays. You can substitute equal parts of maple sugar for refined sugar in recipes. So next we have one that might not be quite as recognizable to everyone, but can generally be found in your grocery aisle: date syrup. So 1 tablespoon of date syrup has more than twice the potassium, calcium, and magnesium levels of even maple syrup or honey, and up to 10 times the antioxidants. This type of sweetener can be swapped into recipes by substituting half of what the recipe calls for. So if you have 1 cup of sugar, you can use half a cup of sugar and half a cup of date syrup. The last one is a little bit controversial between Maddie and I. The last one is coconut sugar. It's actually made from the processed sap of the blossoms, not actual coconuts. And coconut sugar has a low glycemic index. A glycemic index quantifies how quickly and dramatically a food raises your blood glucose levels. It doesn't taste like coconut, although Maddie can taste a hint of it when her mom uses it. It has a mild caramel flavor, which makes it pretty versatile. It's excellent in candies and can be used as a one-to-one replacement in cookies and crumbles. And the interesting thing that I find is when you open it up, it kind of looks like a cross between granulated sugar and brown sugar.
I love those tips, Lisa. Yeah, coconut sugar, I find it depends on what brand you're using. Sometimes it's almost like they put some like a coconut flavoring in it. And some people probably love that with their holiday recipes. So just make sure you take a look out for that. But it does, like Lisa said, makes for some delicious desserts. So we've talked about sugar and we've talked about flour. Tell us about all of that butter. What can we do there?
Yeah. Pounds and pounds of butter are consumed during the holidays. And swapping out fat and sweet treats is actually pretty easy. Most of the choices that I'm offering here are shelf stable, so they don't take up valuable real estate in your fridge either. So here's a few of my favorites. First, we have coconut oil. So for any recipe that calls for butter, consider using coconut oil instead. Like butter, coconut oil is solid at room temperature, but it's lower in sodium. It also has healthy fats that have been found to help lower cholesterol and as well as aid in weight loss. You can feel free to swap in a 1-to-1 ratio of coconut oil in any baking recipe. I usually melt and cool the oil in the microwave to mimic softened butter. That way it mixes evenly into your batter. The next up is olive oil. Olive oil is a staple in my kitchen, probably most of yours, for everything from sauteing to pan-searing, but did you know you can also use it in sweet recipes? Olive oil provides much appreciated moisture to baked goods, but also be mindful that some of the flavor of the oil will shine through, especially if you're using a fancy extra virgin olive oil that has that grassy flavor. If you're looking for a good mix, you can use a 50-50 combination of oil and butter in your favorite recipes. And last, we have all of our purees. Applesauce, mashed bananas, sweet potatoes, and avocado can all be used to replace butter. Much like olive oil, fruit purees benefit from butter's flavor and fat, so I usually like to swap in about half of the puree for butter or coconut oil in my baked goods to get the best flavor, moisture, and texture. One thing to keep in mind, make sure your puree is smooth so there aren't any lumps in your finished product, and less little bits of apples in your baked good is what you're looking for.
Lisa, this has been incredibly helpful. And I love taking practical nutrition education on balance and combining that with doable cooking swaps like these. It makes for a perfect pairing that doesn't feel so overwhelming.
I agree, Maddie. And besides ingredient swaps, let's pivot back to any other advice on navigating all those tempting holiday goodies. The dessert table can be really challenging, especially for my children. I feel like I need to put a fence up around it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we all feel a lot of guilt around desserts and snacking during the holidays because we know that our meals are more savory and more dense than they normally are. Having desserts and snacks can feel like you're pulling out one too many blocks in your big game of Jenga. And now all of your hard work and your healthy habits are crashing down around you, and it doesn't feel great. But I'm here to tell everybody today, nutrition does not work that way though. One day or even 1 week of overindulgence for most people doesn't typically make or break somebody's health.
That's so true. I love your Jenga reference. So what's the best thing to do here to just let go of all that holiday guilt and relax and enjoy time with friends and family?
Letting go of that guilt is a great piece of advice in and of itself, but I know it's just not as easy as it sounds. And for some people, we do want to try to stay on track so that we feel our best. My recommendation is to try, when you're in your holiday headspace, think a step ahead. So if you're eating a meal like breakfast and you know that there are other meals and other desserts and things coming up next, think about what is coming so that you know how much to indulge in certain areas and where to maybe cut back a little in others. So I'm going to give a practical and a kind of comical example here, but if you're like my family, we have breakfast dessert during the holidays. Every year I can expect it. I never know exactly what it's going to be, but I always know there will be breakfast dessert. So when I take my first helping of breakfast, I make sure to keep in mind that the breakfast dessert is coming out next so that I don't take too much of a helping for breakfast and I can actually enjoy that coffee cake without being overstuffed and just not feeling my best as a result. Honestly, it's all about finding an equilibrium with food that works for your busy day.
This has all been so helpful. And I am personally making a call out for breakfast dessert for 2022. I may even still have time to implement it into my meal plan for 2021.
I think there's always some time for some breakfast dessert. It's all about that balance, you know? My family has done that forever, and it just is so much fun for the holidays. And they will even continue it beyond the holiday time, but that's a discussion for another day. And now I am really into the holiday spirit after talking about all of those great swaps. And as we wrap up, we just want to take a few minutes to talk about how Foodsmart can support you now and help to simplify your eating efforts this holiday season.
So first, let's start about chatting about our amazing team of registered dietitians, of which you, Maddie, are a part of.
Yes. So our registered dietitians are experts in all things nutrition related. We work with you and create a plan that is customized to your lifestyle and goals. Whether you are trying to manage your weight, you're trying to treat a chronic condition, maybe you want to discuss and work through an emotional relationship with food. I know that's something that I struggle with, and it's helpful to have somebody to talk to about that. Or maybe you're in the group of people who's just trying to find healthy dinner options in a sea of misinformation and complicated recipes. Regardless, our registered dietitians can support you. That's what they're there for. RD appointments, registered dietitian appointments at Foodsmart may be included in your health plan's offering free of charge. You can click on the link in the chat box to get started with a registered dietitian at Foodsmart today.
Great. That's just very super helpful. And I've had close relationships with you guys, and you're all just wonderful.
Oh, thanks,
So
Lisa.
next, let's talk about a few of the other useful tools that are available to you on the Foodsmart platform. So I personally love the meal planning tool because I'm a chef and a mom, and it makes it super simple to incorporate all of these tips we talked about today into your menu planning for the holidays and beyond. We have healthy recipes for everyone in your family, a huge database that span every cuisine and flavor preference. There's even curated lists for recipes that can be made in 30 minutes or less, and budget-friendly options because we're all looking to stretch our grocery budget during this time of year. And then once you start making meals with Foodsmart, you can heart the recipes your family gives the thumbs up to create your own personal cookbook in the app. Using those recipes, you can generate a weekly meal plan in a matter of minutes to reference for meals throughout the week.
We also integrate with Walmart, Amazon Fresh, and Instacart for quick and contactless grocery shopping if you are trying to avoid or limit trips to the store during this chaotic time of year. When you create a meal plan in the Foodsmart app, Foodsmart will generate a shopping list of the items that you'll need that can then be added to your shopping cart with just a few taps of your finger. And that means if you're anything like me, your days of writing your grocery list and losing it or leaving it at home are long gone. You can even compare prices across the platforms and find the best deals for you and your family, which again is so important this time of year when we are all trying to watch our spending.
Definitely. And I love the fact that you can invite other household members to the family meal plan with you. That means that everyone can share in the joy of grocery shopping and putting together the meal plan and see what's happening, so you don't have that eternal question of what's for dinner. We also have an amazing blog. We keep members engaged and forming new healthy eating habits through newsletters. Some of them are from our amazing registered dietitians. Some of them I write. We have webinars like you're attending right now, and we use these to create a strong network of tools to drive healthier eating decisions. And it's all created by our in-house medical and registered dietitian team. All right, I think now we have time for a few questions, and I see 7 of them in the Q&A, so I'm going to pull those up. Maddie, should we start in the Q&A? Did you see anything come across the chat that was particularly exciting?
Yeah, I have a one thing that I would love to address. First of all, I just want to say it's incredible to see a chat where everybody is communicating with each other and being supportive. This is a really hard time of year, and nutrition is a challenging thing for a lot of people. I'm a registered dietitian, and it's still challenging for me too. I think that's just part of being a human. So thank you all for being so kind and supportive and sharing your awesome tips and tricks in the chat. I think that's just great to have a community like that. I saw a question that I wanted to address, which I think is a great one, that asked about, what the real benefit is of using different flours. And Lisa, I'll let you jump in here. So really, if you want to use a different option of flour, and this goes hand in hand with the sweeteners or the butter substitutes as well, it really depends on what your health needs and preferences are. For some people, those swaps make so much sense. If they're trying to eat more fiber, choosing a different flour is really helpful. If you are diabetic or you're cooking for diabetic family members, then using a different type of sugar or cutting back on your sugar altogether can be really helpful. So those things are all so individualized based on what your needs are. So no one option is necessarily better than the other. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve with your meal. I find it really helpful to make some swaps in certain areas, depending on who I'm cooking for. So if I do have diabetic family members who are coming to the table, I'll make sure that I use a different type of sugar, or I'll make sure that I'll use a heartier flour that has some fiber, because when you add a fiber into your meals, it can help stabilize blood sugar as it's coming down from its peak at meal times. I know that's a general overview. I'll answer some more specific questions about sweeteners and alternatives and so on in a minute, but I wanted to just say that I think that it all really depends on what your needs and preferences are. Lisa, anything to add there?
Yeah, we had a piggyback on that. And then I have another question here about sugar substitutes. So calorically, flours can range between 640 calories per cup for an almond flour versus around 400 or so for your whole wheat and white flour. But with that trade-off, you're getting higher protein, different nutritional value, like Maddie alluded to when she was talking just a second ago. And then I wanted to ask you, Maddie, because as a chef, I don't have much experience with this. With your diabetic family members, do you ever use stevia or Splenda as a sugar substitute? I always just think of them as like little packets.
That's a great question. And sometimes I will. I think it depends on what I'm serving. So there are some years where I'll make a lot of desserts. And because I have a handful of different options, I want to give some different options for amounts of sugar and things as well. So sometimes I'll do that. And then you can look at your ratios and you can either cut all of your sugar out and replace it with a stevia or a Splenda or something along those lines, or you can sort of go half and half, and that can really help individuals. And what you're trying to achieve there when you're changing your sugar and using an artificial sweetener is to not have that spike in blood sugar that normally comes with having a high content sugar item. So just depends on who I'm cooking for during the year and what their needs and preferences are. I usually have pretty good success when I'm cooking or baking with a sugar substitute. The flavor is a little bit different. There is a little bit of an aftertaste. If you have artificial sweeteners, you'll know what I'm talking about. But for individuals who are trying to manage their blood sugar, and that's really important to them, it can be a worthwhile swap so that they can still enjoy a favorite item.
Great. And then we have a question here from Tracy Nelson. Trying to follow a low, no processed food plan. That's great. Like getting to the source is always a healthy way to go. So purchase lentil pasta, rice lentils in place of regular rice and regular pasta. What are your thoughts on these alternative pastas and rice? I can give my thoughts from a chef perspective, and then maybe you can touch on nutritionally. I find these alternative, the lentil and the lentil pastas and the rice pastas, you have to handle them a little bit differently. I definitely cook them a little bit underdone and different than a regular pasta. I give them a rinse. I find that if I don't, they're a little bit gummy. And then once I toss them with the sauce, I feel as though then they cook through and they still have that nice al dente bite. I'll give a plug, unsolicited plug for the Banza brand. I really like that. And then with rice, I really love white rice. I think it has a great flavor. It almost has like a pilaf-y flavor to it. So I enjoy that. But from a nutritional standpoint, where do you live? Where do you sit?
Yeah, so I actually really enjoy these alternatives. I find it a great way to add some extra protein to my diet and oftentimes some extra fiber or a different source of fiber. Something that I've learned in my career as an RD and through all the research that I've been combing through, even recently, is that one of the best things you can do for your diet is just to give yourself lots of variety. So switching between different types of natural options when it comes to your rice and your flour and so on, I think is really beneficial for your overall health. That can help your gut. It just keeps your body on its toes, not to use an analogy, but I think that that's a good one. You want to keep your body working and trying new things, and that's a great way to maintain your overall health. So I think, and Lisa, to your point, I think they cook a little bit differently, but once you kind of find your groove and you find what works best for you, they can be really great. A question that I see it a couple of times, is explaining why a coconut oil is better than butter when it's higher in saturated fat or it's higher in fat content. Great question. And that's why I clarified that none of these options are necessarily better for you per se than other option. Coconut oil is a great alternative if you need a vegan option for somebody, or somebody's really trying to monitor their plant-based fats or their animal-based fats. If they're trying to make some changes there, it can be a really great option that a lot of people aren't quite sure how to cook with and prepare with. So that can be really helpful. Some people also really like to use it for the flavor itself too. So other folks, maybe they have an allergy and intolerance to butter, and that doesn't tend to sit very well with them. Sometimes coconut oil will be a better alternative in that way. So not necessarily better, healthier, but it is always great, especially when you're cooking for other people in the holidays, to have all sorts of options in mind for people who might need something different.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. We make the same recipes every single year. And I've really liked using coconut oil, like you said, for just a different flavor experience. And it makes you stretch as a chef in the kitchen, a cook in the kitchen, to reach for something a little bit different. It could be the same recipe, just with just a little bit of a twist.
Yeah, I love that. And such a great question and such a great call out. I love questions like that when people are wanting to learn more about why would you make a swap, or why is it worth it to make a change? Is it enough? Sort of this year old saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? And it really just depends on each individual. I cannot stress and highlight that enough. You and your family the best, and what they need and what's going to be the most important on the dinner table for them during the holidays, and for yourself too. So keep those things in mind, but always know that there are lots of swaps and lots of alternatives available that you can use and really enjoy.
One thing that just came to my mind that I wanted to mention to folks, a tip I have, and when you are purchasing butter, because it's gonna happen, I always reach for the unsalted butter. Salt and butter is not regulated, so one stick of butter could be saltier than another, especially during baked goods. When you're making baked goods, they always call for unsalted butter, and then you can control how much salt you're adding. So even just like that small, simple tweak can make a difference.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Lisa. A question I've gotten from a few people in different ways, some anonymous. I have a similar question from somebody named Robin, and then a few other anonymous folks. But what do you do if you have family members who are either really insistent on eating a certain thing or cooking a certain way that's unhealthy, and you are really trying to watch your nutrition and that's important for you? How do you navigate those challenging waters during the holidays? I think, Lisa, you can speak to this too. We both have families. We know how hard the holidays can be and how hard it is to get somebody to give up some control in the kitchen or try something new, especially when those traditions, they run deep. They're really important to people. What I recommend is, when I look at situations like that within my own family, I will always try to offer, if there's something that I really want or I really want to look out for, I offer to bring that item. If I'm told no, or, I can tell that they're a little upset, then maybe I'll offer to bring something different. Maybe that means that I'm trying something new that year, but new isn't always a bad thing. That's a great way to combat issues in that way. You bring your own item. So if somebody makes really delicious but unhealthy mashed potatoes that usually leave you feeling heavy, weighed down, they just have a lot of extra fat in that doesn't sit well with your stomach, then maybe you offer to bring a salad or something that's like brand new to the group and start a new tradition in that way. That can be a really healthy, a really great tip. Lisa, do you have any other tips for sort of how to help with difficult situations like that?
I totally stand behind what you said, and who initially came to my mind is my father-in-law. He grew up in a time where it was like, if there wasn't bread and butter on the table with every meal, then you weren't eating a full meal. And what I found, I've really stretched both he and my mother-in-law's minds into like different flavor possibilities. And I feel like if you bring something new and exciting to the table and people at the table are open to trying it, you're creating a new tradition. They're excited by the new flavors, and they're not missing that bread and butter at the table.
That's great. I have a couple questions here asking about if Foodsmart has recipes for different health related issues, whether that's stomach problems, people who have diabetes and need lower carbohydrate options. Answer to that is yes, there are different recipe categories, and those range through different disease states and nutrition needs, but also preferences too. So people who want to spend less time on cooking, maybe who prefer certain meals or have specific preferences, you can adjust there. And then another important call out to that is that our registered dietitians, RDs like myself, we go through really extensive training on all different types of disease states, both acute and chronic, even ones that are less well known. We go through really extensive training on all of those things. And then also behavioral training as well, so that we can discuss cultural and societal nuances. We can discuss family dynamics and how challenging that is for you. And then we can actually provide you education very specific to you on your health needs. So if you're having some GI concerns or some troubling allergies, and that really flares up during the holidays, we can really individualize your meal plan, but also your plan of care and how you will navigate these difficult times. We can do that together, which is great.
We've got so from an anonymous attendee, we have a lot of recipes have dairy. For those who are lactose intolerant, is there a good substitution for milk and cream cheese? I think that the 2020 and 2021 was an amazing year for those who are lactose intolerant. If you look in the grocery aisle, there's so many different types of lactose free. There's hemp, rice milk, almond milk, great types of soy cheese that you can use in recipes. So I think that you just need to give those a try and see what flavors resonate with you.
Yeah, Lisa, I could not agree more. I notice I'm more sensitive to lactose each year, the older that I get. And I have personally tried a lot of the lactose sensitive options available at the store. The cream cheese is shockingly delicious. I wouldn't know the difference unless somebody told me, and the cheeses and all the different available options have changed so much to really taste like real dairy products. So really, really great options that are out there now. So take a look for those, try some out. You'll find what you like best. But Lisa said it perfectly. Last year was a good year for that.
Yeah, and oat milk came on the scene. I see a lot of call outs for oat milk. That is now our milk of choice, our alt milk of choice in our household for everything from smoothies to coffees. We love our oat milk around here.
We do too. And Lisa, really great thing to mention about oat milk too is that I love that it's more shelf stable, I guess, or it can last longer in the refrigerator than a traditional dairy option. So if you're not using it all that often, it keeps a little bit better, a little bit longer, and it's thick and creamy. And I just love it in all of my recipes. It's been great.
Definitely. Um, so we've got just a few more minutes here. I need to chat with Diana, who's probably one of our most popular attendees because they're going to 3 Thanksgiving dinners in the same day. How are they going to tackle that? What's the best approach to ensure that they don't overeat?
Yes, Diana, you are going to have a busy day for sure. You're going to need a massage and a spa day after that. So that can be challenging. I get that too, going from house to house and meeting with different people, and also, wanting to be polite and try different things and really be part of that whole experience. What I recommend is just really paying attention to your hunger and fullness cues. I think that's such a basic piece of advice. And I wish there was like a magic response, but I think that is just so important when you sit down at the table to eat. Think about how hungry you really are when you are taking your portion sizes. Start with a little bit. You can always go back for more if you are still hungry, but I would just start with a little bit less, see how you feel, and then, go about your day. And for each meal, you might not be as hungry when you sit down as you were for the one before it. So just keep that in mind and keep your portions of your items smaller, and then you can go back and add to those plates. I think that that's a great way to stay on top of it. Also, looking out for your beverages when you're going to multiple dinners in the same day is really helpful too. Make sure you're drinking lots of water and stay away from those sugary beverages as best you can, or at least space them out pretty well throughout your day. That will help you keep you from feeling that kind of groggy, icky feeling you can have when you're eating a lot in one day.
Yeah, yeah. And I think another approach from, a chef's angle would be to use them as maybe like 3 different restaurants where you're like, maybe the first place you have the salad and the starters, and then the next place you have a main event. And I know we always host the after turkey holiday dessert party. So that could be another way to space out your meals too.
I love that idea. That's really, really great. Thanks, Lisa.
So I'm trying to, I think I put this one. Anything else you see that's piquing your interest here? That now that we only have just a few minutes left.
Yeah, a great question I see here from Dolores is, where can I find a breakdown of nutrients we should be getting on a balanced diet? Excellent question. What my opinion is on this is a great way to find that out is to meet with an RD and get that information from them. Everybody's nutrient breakdown is going to differ based on your biometric data, based on your medical history, your family history, the activities that you are doing on a day-to-day basis, what your stress looks like. Just there's so many factors. And what's interesting about a balanced diet too is what works for you today and what your nutrient breakdown today is may not be what your nutrient breakdown is in a month, because we know how crazy life is and how much it changes. So meeting with an RD is a great way to get a really solid and accurate piece of information on that. And then they can help you determine that. There are lots of calculators and information out there that can be helpful and maybe lead you down the right path. But the problem with that is a calculator or anything that you'll find online just doesn't know you as well as another person will. It can't take into account the fact that you haven't worked out in 2 weeks, but you've been chasing toddlers around, or you're carrying one kid on each hip and you're chasing another one. And that's exhausting. So it just can't take all those things into account like another person can. And that's my best recommendation for finding out what exactly those numbers should be for you.
Yeah. Maddie, I really love your reference that you use that you're part of somebody's team.
Yes, exactly. So I think this is such an important thing to call out for RDs too, is when we work with individuals, I know how important it is for nutrition to be a team sport. It's not just one person against the nutrition world. It is you and your family members and all of the complicated relationships with foods that they have too. And the RD is there to really be the quarterback on your team, to be able to pivot and be nimble and change the plan if it's not working one day, and just be your support system, because we all need that when it comes to food. It really is a team effort. And when you have a supportive teammate and a supportive quarterback, you are so much more likely to meet your health goals, whatever they are.
Well, it looks like this is all the time we have for today. We so much appreciate this amazing chat. You guys have been, like Maddie said, so supportive of one another, so amazing, and giving tips and recipe ideas that you all like to use during the holidays and beyond. We will be sending out the recording of this webinar for you guys to reference throughout the holiday season. And we'll be back Q1 of next year to chat more about how to eat healthy in a delicious way.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great holiday season.
Yep, you too, Maddie, but I'm sure I'll see you again. Everybody
Yes,
else.
I'm sure.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.